Now, welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that asked, what do you think of the 6th episode of Ahsoka? I'll, of course, also then be reading and responding to some of the comments. And so let's get right to it, right to the results, where we'll see that 43% of voters thought this was an awesome episode. 33% then went with it was pretty good. 14% thought it was mid or average. Then there were 4% who thought it wasn't very good, and a final 6% who thought it was terrible. And as we've been doing these past few weeks, let's compare these results to the previous episode's results and see that, well, yeah, there was a bit of a drop, but I don't think that's all too surprising when you consider what the episode before this had in it. I don't think this is a condemnation of the current episode. It's simply hard to compete with the return of Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker and Clone Wars flashbacks with Ahsoka. Though that said, yeah, the first ever live-action appearance of Thrawn and the reunion of Ezra and Sabine should, and I think for the most part did, kind of rival that. I thought this was overall a really great episode, one that set the table for the final 2 episodes to come. This has got us set up for hopefully a pretty great finale, though, as I pointed out in my review, I do feel like it was maybe a bit too rushed. All of it kind of happened really fast. I think all of this instead taking place over the course of, say, 2 episodes, or maybe even more, depending on what you do with it, kind of giving us, or the characters, a chance to explore this new world more, not to mention a whole new galaxy. I think that would have been kind of cool or nice to just kind of slow down the pace and let us absorb what the heck is going on here. And yeah, maybe have it be a bit of a struggle for Sabine to find Ezra. I honestly thought that getting to the other galaxy was only going to be half the battle, that the other half would be having to find him once he got here. But it turns out there he was, just hanging with some crab people. But anyway, I still highly enjoyed the episode. I know people sometimes get frustrated that I always have to point out something that I took issue with or found wrong about the episode, that seemingly I can't just love it for what it is. But the thing is, those don't have to be mutually exclusive things. Something doesn't have to be flawless to be loved, and if it did, no one would ever find love in the world. Plus, on the rare occasions when I do just kind of rave about how great an episode is, if I don't point out something wrong with it, it'll mean a hell of a lot more that way. It'll convey just how much I actually loved it, more so than if I raved about every single episode. And with that, let's now get to your comments, but not before once again just saying thank you to everyone who votes, comments, watches these or any of my videos, as well as those of you who have been leaving questions for lightning response videos. Thank you for making this channel, and my other one as well, what they are. It is an honor and a privilege to talk some Star Wars with all of you, and also a huge thank you to those who support my channel over on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And so now let's kick it off, as we always do, with the top rated comment left on the poll, which this time came to us from Jet Blast, who said, 2 things episode 6 left me excited for. Thrawn's reaction when he learns who Ahsoka's master is, and Ezra's reaction when he learns how Sabine found him. And if we take the books into account, the newest Thrawn trilogies, well, Thrawn should already know who Ahsoka's master was. But then again, we don't know if Dave Filoni is going to take those books into account. Furthermore, Thrawn also knows Anakin became Darth Vader. He also kind of figured that out in the books as well. He meets Anakin back during the Clone Wars, and then, of course, meets Vader during the Galactic Civil War, and he puts 2 and 2 together. As for Sabine and Ezra, this isn't or shouldn't go well for Sabine. I mean, the whole reason Ezra is here in this other galaxy is because he basically sacrificed himself to bring Thrawn here, to remove the massive threat that Thrawn is from the board. And now here's Sabine undoing what he gave up the last 10 years of his life for. She's helping Thrawn get back to the other galaxy, granted unintentionally, you could say. Though, all that said, in general, Ezra is a pretty chill, calm, forgiving guy, and he still seems to be that way from the little bit we got of him. Though I don't know if he will be this time, and I really think he should be pretty pissed off about what Sabine has done, even though, yeah, she has kind of rescued him. Kinda, because they still have to find a way to get back. But I'm not so sure this is something Ezra just kind of shrugs away, though something tells me it might be that simple. As simple as Ezra kind of shrugging and saying, then I guess we'll have to beat Thrawn again, together. Either way, let's move on to this comment from a Silver Scion, who said, I feel like this episode finally gave me what I've been wanting from mainline Star Wars for a while. New lore. Yes, we've seen the Night Sisters before, but to see a whole planet and culture that expands our knowledge of the Star Wars galaxy and its origins is something I'm really happy to see. And their incorporation while raising new questions still feels in line with the more mystical approach to the Force that George took in the OT. That then kind of goes along with this comment from Hanakin Sidewalker, who said, I think it brought a lot to the table. It really felt like the first dive into a new frontier, one that could exist unfettered by the sequel trilogy. The planetary rings being made of millions of dead Purrgils seem to be a testament to this idea. It's something we've never seen in live-action Star Wars before, and it's a genuinely creative idea. I'm intrigued to see where they go from here. And honestly, I almost feel like this whole other galaxy, instead of exploring the parts of the original galaxy that are still unknown or unexplored, which is like half the galaxy, it's almost like this catch-22 in a way. It's cool to see something completely brand new, and I'm already interested in what this power Baylan feels out there is and how it's connected to the stories of old, the stories you heard as a kid back at the Jedi Temple. But now there's this whole other galaxy to explore or know more about when the original galaxy is not even close to fully explored. And I'm very, very curious to see how much we're even going to learn about this other galaxy, how long we'll even stay here. Will we even get some of the most basic questions answered about it, such as how does it compare to the original galaxy in terms of alien life and technology? How does the Force work here, and is it even here, which I'm assuming it is. I think it permeates throughout the entire universe. And what kind of central government does this galaxy have, or does it not have any kind of central government at all? And just what the hell is going on here in general, or has been over the past, well, as long as it's been around, right? What is the basic history of this galaxy? And though we have no idea which of those questions will be answered, or just, again, how long we'll even be in this other galaxy, it could be we get back by the end of the season, it could be we don't get back there anytime soon. Nor do we know long-term how much this galaxy will be used, if we'll have stories set within it that have nothing to do with this current story. But right now, I do wonder if it just makes more sense, or would have made more sense for this planet, the origin of the Night Sisters and all that, if it was just somewhere in the unknown regions of the original galaxy that the Purrgil somehow still know how to get to, but no one else does. I don't know, I'm not passing any sort of final judgment here, but bringing in another galaxy is essentially doubling the lore and history potential of Star Wars, which, yeah, that sounds cool, but let's be honest, there was still plenty of lore and history to discover in a single galaxy, much less two. Alright, and next up here we have a comment from Derek Lopez, who said, the relationship between Baylan Skoll and Shin has been fascinating to me since the first episode, and I like that we get to learn a bit more about them. More, please. We also had this one from Spooky Halloween Girl, who said, as excited as I was to finally see Thrawn in live action after 30 plus years waiting, and to see Sabine and Ezra reunited, once again it was Baylan that was a standout for me. Who or what does he sense there? What do the old stories tell of? What is the beginning he seeks, and how is it different from what has already been? Does he seek a return to what the Jedi once were before they became so dogmatic and caught up in politics? Or is there something more? I find his character absolutely fascinating. It says something about the way Baylan is written and the performance by Ray Stevenson, may he rest in peace, that he was able to keep me as invested in his story as I am with Thrawn's and Ezra's. And yeah, I think those two, especially Baylan and the performance by Ray Stevenson, they've been by far the best and most interesting parts of the show. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that my favorite parts of this particular episode were pretty much everything with those two. Especially when you consider, as pointed out in that comment, that this is the first time we've ever seen Thrawn in live action, after 30 years of him existing in books and comics and, of course, Rebels. And it's also the episode, speaking of Rebels, where we see the reunion of Sabine and Ezra that was left hanging 5 years ago in that show. And yet, despite all that, I would have been just as happy with an hour-long episode simply called Story Time with Baylan Skoll, where he just sits there on a rock and tells the tales of old, of the history of the Star Wars galaxy, and of this one, of these myths he's basically speaking of this beginning he's talking about, and where we could also, of course, dig even further into this character in general that I think has captivated most of us watching. I mean, his passing in itself is obviously a sad, sad, horrible tragedy. But him also being easily one of the most fascinating Star Wars characters of the Disney era only makes this franchise feel cursed at this point. Like, even when something goes right, something else has to go wrong to counterbalance it. Because I have a feeling this was only the beginning for Baylan, that they had big, big plans for him going forward, and if they didn't, then I don't know what the hell they were thinking, because he demands your attention every time he is on screen, and he should have been on screen a lot more, and again, it is just so unfortunate that we lost Ray Stevenson. Alright, and moving on here, we have a comment from Majan Moke, who said, I gave it was amazing because despite barely featuring the title character, it was firing on all cylinders, intriguing Baylan and the Night Sisters, intimidating Thrawn, and a little bit of charm with the Wolf, Horse, and Sabine Ezra interactions. It took me back to Rebels, and I was all in. 9 out of 10, and I could change that to 10 out of 10 if the mystery boxes this episode raises get satisfying answers later. And speaking of it feeling like Star Wars is perhaps cursed, or like they can't quite ever just get things right, it's kind of crazy that what I'd argue is perhaps the second best episode of the series thus far, and only, again, because of the return of Hayden and all of that. But it's sad that the second best episode barely had Ahsoka in it, other than at the beginning with her and Huyang, which, yeah, I think was partly there to make us wonder if the story Huyang told had anything to do with or was essentially the same one Baylan refers to. And partially, I think it may have been there to not completely Book of Boba Fett her. It was their way of having her show up in an episode that didn't have her in it for most of it, and honestly didn't really need her. At no point in the episode was I thinking, I hope we go back to Ahsoka at some point, or I hope she shows up soon. And mind you, I'm a huge fan of Ahsoka, but I almost feel like they've struggled to really make her feel like a big part of the overarching story here. Like, this could have just as easily been Sabine finding the map to the other galaxy and going off in search of Ezra alone, and we'd end up with pretty much the same thing. I don't know, this has felt far more like Rebels Season 5 than the Ahsoka series, and I really think it should have been named as such. I don't mean name it Rebels Season 5 now in live action. I just mean something a bit more vague, or something that implies its relation to the Rebels series better, because even what you could argue is Ahsoka's main connection to Ezra, that she saw him in the world between worlds and made this promise to come find him, that hasn't been addressed at all. And so really, I think they needed to find a better way to kind of integrate Ahsoka into her own show, to integrate her into Season 5 of Rebels. Alright, and now let's do a few final comments before wrapping it up, starting with this one from Clanodek, who said, I loved it. Thrawn was magnificent. Ezra looked and felt like Ezra. Sabine felt like the most Sabine she's felt so far in this show. And those new Night Sisters had such a mystique. It gave serious Dave Filoni vibes, and I loved it. Huyang saying, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, brought me chills. And Baylan and Shin were the MVPs of the episode. I can't wait to see what's next. There's also this one from Dwarf1977 who said, I loved all the authentic battle damage on the ship and the troopers, getting some Baylan and Shin backstory, and hearing Thrawn's voice. I am having issues with Thrawn visually, however, something about his hairline or his forehead. Then we got this comment from Enraged Tofu who said, this is the Star Wars I was hoping for with the sequels as an old school 80s fan who watched and loved Rebels. After 2 tacky series and 1 masterpiece, that being Andor, this is the happy middle of old and new I've been yearning for. Did not think I would have, but I seriously got teary-eyed seeing Ezra and Sabine reunion. Thrawn in action brought it into actualization when just the images did not. Also then we have this one from Nick Allen who said, I loved this episode. I thought several times throughout the episode that this is how you endear a character to an audience. I love Sabine. And I never thought I'd say this, but she's actually super cool, and she's cool because she's not perfect. She fails over and over. She's relatable. It's awesome. Moving on, we also have this one from only one Star Wars fan who said, best episode yet. Yeah, aspects of it can be picked apart, but it actually felt like new grand scale Star Wars. This is what the ideal sequel trilogy should have been like. We then had this comment from Paul McSoul who said, it felt like a table-setting episode. I think they could have moved a little faster, but it was pretty solid. Thrawn is clearly a threat, though I can't wait to see what he and the Night Mothers are fleeing from. And finally, we have this comment from Vixen24 who said, it was hard to follow up last week's amazing episode, but I really enjoyed it. Live-action Ezra is perfectly cast, and it seems very in character that he's been living with a bunch of crab people, lol. It was cool seeing Thrawn again and hearing his Rebels voice. I didn't think we'd get both of them revealed in the same episode, as I predicted they would spread out the reveals, but I was pleasantly surprised. Baylan Skoll was the most interesting for me. I'm curious what his motivations are and what he actually hopes to find in this new galaxy. Overall, I really liked the episode and think these final 2 episodes are going to be amazing. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this episode, or what you thought of what I or anyone else in the comments had to say about it. Whatever the case may be though, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.